Welcome to the Adapt Performance Podcast, the podcast that lets you delve into the minds of world-class guests all involved in the pursuit of performance. I'm your host, Jordan Webster, and let's get into it. What's going on, guys? Hope you're doing well. So I'm just going to tee up this episode a little bit by introducing Gary, kind of giving you an insight into who he is and how I know him. So he's the current S&C coach at GB Boxing, and Gary's had a roller coaster of a career, ups, downs, lefts, rights. He's gone everywhere and done everything, and not just in the S&C industry. So it's super useful to listen to his story and realize that it's definitely not straight line from A to B. The way I know Gary is we both came through similar kind of, I'm going to say, upbringings through S&C, but we both started off at Sheffield Hallam. He's a few years older than me. I don't know how many years actually, but he's always been one of those kind of names that's been thrown around, and he left Hallam before I got there, and he kind of, it's almost left over as a little bit of a legacy. It tends to happen in facilities, there's always that Godfather type of vibe. But he's always been super responsive and helpful for somebody that he's never actually met face to face. He was always willing to, give me a little bit of advice if I had a question, jump on Zoom and, talk me through some of the queries I had around the industry, particular careers. He's always somebody that I could kind of lean on, which is rare a little bit actually. And it's something that I think I've taken from conversations with Gary is it's super easy to be nice and to be helpful. Another good one is one of my goals that I kind of came up with early this year was that I want to do a TED Talk, and I know that Gary had done one, so I will put these in the show notes so you can go and visit and have a little listen because it's awesome. Gary's the only person I know that's done a TED Talk, within my immediate circle. So I reached out to him, asked him about his process and all those things. And he was like, tell you what, mate, how about we grab a beer? Okay. And in the end, it turned out, went round to his house, I went round and had spag bol with him, his wife and his 3 kids, which was awesome. It was really, really nice. And his secret weapon to getting me to open up was to get me pissed. I'm not really a drinker, and even though I think in this podcast episode I referenced getting pissed about 3 or 4 times, so it's not me, I swear. But yeah, by the end of it, I was wonky. I was Wolf of Wall Street, lewds. It was like that. Getting from his sofa to his back door might be like 10 meters, but I swear to God, in my mind, I did that 10 meters in one step. I was flying. But yeah, anyway, so actually getting into the nuts and bolts of it, I think you're really going to enjoy the episode. In terms of actual sets and reps, there is almost none of it in this episode, actually. It's definitely a little bit more philosophical. We're getting into the why and how you actually approach problem solving, and it definitely is a deep episode, but hopefully you enjoy it. I really enjoy these types of chats. It's something that's a little bit different and definitely something that isn't taught on sports science degrees, and it's not something that's kind of commonly gone over. So if you enjoyed the episode, share it with somebody. That means the world. Just kind of passing it to a friend that you think might benefit from this. And I don't even think it needs to be somebody that's an S&C coach to benefit from this type of info. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into the episode. Here is Gary. Yes, Gary, we are live, mate. How are we doing?
Yeah, doing very well, thanks, mate. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Mate, it seems to be a reoccurring theme with these podcasts. It's like the night before I have the worst hay fever in the world. I don't know if you're a pollen sufferer like I am, but it's bad. Yeah, I managed to survive it this morning, so I don't sound too bunged up. It's good. It's good stuff.
I'm touch wood. I've always been pretty lucky with that, but then I have 2 till 3 in the mornings, seems to be where I get my best ideas in the day. So I had an interesting night's sleep where I was thinking about scoliosis between 2 and 3 o'clock. So
hey, I'm sure, I don't know if you've ever seen Paranormal Activity, but I'm sure that's like the witching hour or something like that. There's got to be something in that.
Yeah, all the kids hour, the 3 kids waking up hour.
Sick. What have you been up to this morning, mate? What have you been doing today?
Nice day today. Planning up for next week. We've got an international training camp in prep for the Commonwealth Games with GB Boxing. So they finished off their camp this week yesterday, which gives me a little bit of space today to look at what's going to go next week. I've had a few multi-sport athletes come through the door and do a decent bit of training, get some heavy weights shifted, and they're in their off season now, so it's that fun time where you get to do whatever you want with them. And
what multi-sport do you work with?
Great.
Who you got?
So my role, mate, is 3 days a week looking after and heading up the S&C for boxing, but then I get 2 days a week where I'm working with a range of different multi-sport athletes. Big focus at the moment, squash, but I've worked with swimming, equestrian, para-equestrian, and anybody that comes through the door at Sheffield, really. Anybody that's kind of in a sport that isn't big enough to really afford their own program, so they get to put up with me.
Do you like it? Do you like the variety? Is that something that kind of serves you well as a coach?
Oh, it's massive, mate. I think it's a good challenge for progress and development because you get to see insights from a load of different sports, a load of different ways that they function, naturally draw out similarities and focus in on what your philosophy is, what your values are, and what your key elements of the delivery that you do are. And I really like being challenged. So I think if you're in one space and one place, or maybe you're a sole operator that's in one sport, it's really, really difficult sometimes to find that challenge. I'm fortunate I'm in a place where I can get that on tap, really, which helps me progress.
That's sick. Do you I guess being part of like an institute setup, then I imagine you've got a lot of people around you that can kind of assist with, like you just mentioned there, like para equestrian. Mate, I have no clue. Like I literally have no idea where I'd even start with that. What's your kind of process? Is it a Google jobby, or is there people that you can actually go to for support?
Funny, mate, I've been having a few conversations about this recently, but I think like anybody, we all start with that idea of a needs analysis, don't we? And understanding what the crack is with the sport, what the crack is with the athlete, and then how we're going to try and attack both of those things to make an impact. So being part of a network at the EAS is really fortunate because I've got like a network on tap that I don't have to work hard to try and maintain. Like the guys that we've got, I think there's about 46, 47 S&C coaches across the EAS with different sports, and obviously each sport has their own nuances. So if I'm looking for support around a para-equestrian athlete or an athlete with a scoliosis, like I say, that I've been thinking around, I can put a message out, find out who's there and who's up to speed, who's got a lot of experience working in that area from a S&C point of view. But then also I've got physios on tap, or nutritionists on tap, or head of performance services on tap who've worked across many sports. And it's just a great way of being able to draw some of that informal kind of tacit knowledge around particular issues, and then follow a normal process. Like, yeah, it might involve a Google search, it might involve a dig into some research, it definitely involves watching some of the sport. Like, I think it's really easy to miss loads of S&C progress through not actually watching the sport. So decent amount of time just enjoying watching people competing, and learning about the sport through that, talking with the coaches, developing ideas and understanding where their philosophy and understanding of S&C is, so that I can support and challenge in appropriate ways. So I mean, I think we've probably spoke about this a little before, but one of the things that I think gets overlooked a lot is if you're working with a coach, like they've probably worked with a handful of S&C coaches in the past, if they're at the level that I'm kind of functioning with, where they're national programs. So their perception of S&C is going to be built on the interactions they've had with each of those individuals on the way through their career. And if we don't understand the landscape that creates, how can we really like make an impact in our own right and understand where they're coming from to meet them there?
Yeah, I agree, mate. it's funny you say that as well, because that's something I've been discussing recently. So we spoke about this last time we chatted, around this mountain biking team that I'm working with, you know, a contract that came through you guys at the IS, which was awesome. And I'm currently in the process of really figuring out the sport. I'm probably, what we're now, 9 months in, and they've just kind of started their race season. So it's an opportunity to try and get stuck in as much as possible. Going to Switzerland with them next weekend, actually, which will be sick. But it's a way of me trying to look at the sport, one from what they actually do, you know, racing down the hill. That's probably going to be quite similar, but I'm more looking at it from a standpoint of like warm-up strategies, things like that. That was my first thoughts before I went to Fort William, in which case I looked at it and I'm like, there's going to be literally no time in between press, in between, you know, qualifying runs and stuff. It's really going to be trying to iron out those 1%, which I think that's what you kind of just hinted at. You need to go and see it to see where the impact can be made.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good example, isn't it? Because if you could have all the great ideas in the world about how a perfect warm-up should run, but if they're talking to media beforehand and they've got to do a technical briefing, or in the boxing world, they've got their warm-up space, but then they've got 15 minutes of getting out into the ring and waiting for opponents and stuff like that. Like, how's that impacting on what your perfect is? So I think, like, being able to then, and coming full circle, really coming back to the multi-sport idea, being able to be really strong on what your key impactful like metrics are, or your key methods of impact are, I think are really important in those situations, because it allows you to boil down the service you're trying to deliver, so that you're doing the 20% of things that have 80% of the impact that you want to have.
Absolutely, mate. That's this brings me on to another cool, interesting story around sport. And, you know, we look at it from a sports science perspective, and we're trying to really like maximize things. I had Paul Smith on the podcast a few weeks ago, and he's England's strongest man. He's a strong boy, but also really clued up in the S&C world, just gets training, and he gets the other side of it, I guess. And he used to coach me through some strongman comps, and we were in Rotherham, and it was pissing it down, mate. It was drenched. We were in this groggy, muddy field, and one of the events was it was huge, actually. It was like a 260 kilo deadlift from knees, or the kneecap, so it's heavy. But they had no warm-up bars, not one single bit of warm-up equipment, and it was freezing, mate. I can't even describe it. And this was Paul's idea. He was like, well, have you got a resistance band? I was like, yeah, I've got a green, you know, fairly thick resistance band. He's like, all right, get on your shoulders, good mornings, and I'm literally just going to push down on your back, and that is going to be your warm-up. And I'm thinking, you know, it's far from ideal, let's be honest, but it was a case of, you know what, this is where we are, so what is the best case scenario? I just thought that kind of sums up sport sometimes, is we need to find a way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting, like the what makes you think that that's less than ideal, though?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, who knows?
And I think if you can dig down into that, actually, like it's a really nice question to ask and pose, because I guess you performed okay.
Yeah, I did all right. I don't know if I performed better if I would have done a full warm up or done less, but yeah, that's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, I think at the cutting edge, coal face, whatever you want to call it, like working with athletes that are competing at elite level, like you're always working in an N=1 situation, aren't you? So the problem with an N=1 situation is that you can't, there's no like placebo, there's no control group. You can't understand if you had made a slightly different decision, what the impact of that would be. You can only turn yourself over about it afterwards and try and use a reflective practice process to really pick out what you felt was positive and negative. Now, we try and use data to inform that decision making. But even data comes down to kind of the story that you want to tell. So there's such a lot of subjectivity in the process. And I mean, you'd probably suggest there's a few other things you would have liked to do around that warm up in the muddy field in Rotherham. But if your performance was where you expected it to be, or in that region, and you felt okay doing it, you didn't come off injured, you managed the situation in the way that the cards were dealt, then how do you really assess against whether it was effective or not? And it's I know it's we're going off on a massive kind of
love it
theoretical, philosophical kind of brand.
I knew we'd get it, mate. That's why I got you on. I knew we'd get it. And this brings me on to another one, actually. So I had Tommy Mundy on the podcast as well, and we kind of got speaking around the residual training effects. And I put out an infographic maybe 3 months ago, and you asked me about that. Where was my main source of data? And all it took for you to spark that was, well, I found these pieces. We know it's an issuing thing, but have we just based the last 20, 30, 40 years of our like programming perspective based off what one bloke does? Like, we don't know what his process was to decide that it was 30 days for aerobic system. And I don't know if you did any more digging into that, but it actually got me thinking, like, are we just taking it at face value?
I think it's a really interesting one, because like that one element of training residuals informs our entire understanding of the best approach to taper. So I think it has a wide ranging effect. Like the thing that jumps out to me in that conversation is like some of the research around boxing and striking particularly. Like there's an article, a Russian article from the mid 70s, 80s by a guy called Filomonov and his friends. And it's a single pager with not a lot of detail on the methods, but it justifies like the level of force production in a punch across different segments of the body, whether it's upper body, trunk, or lower body. It's really difficult to quality assure how they've gone about doing that, or understand like the logical process. I'm sure it was logical, like otherwise they wouldn't have published the research, but it's difficult to check. So that as a seminal research paper back in the day that gets quoted in every single journal article that gets published nowadays, it makes me question the quality of the research that's getting done nowadays, because how can you quote a journal article that doesn't really give you good solid research backing and content? But equally, like there's some great groups across the country now in combat sports that are really springing up with some good stuff. So right across from Gloucester Uni up to Sheffield Hallam, over in Liverpool, John Moore's a great group, like the guys at Hedge Hill, up to Abertay Uni. Like there's loads of really good combat sport research going on, kind of supporting that process. But I know what you mean, like it's very difficult, challenging seminal ideas that everybody kind of grounds their work in is quite difficult concept to get your head around until you're kind of at the coal face, and then it seems obvious.
Yeah. Will we ever solve that problem? No, but we'll get more and more information that kind of points us hopefully in the right direction. And that's kind of what we're after, I guess. Right. This segues us right into, I guess, the beginning, mate. So we jump straight into some heavy stuff there. How about you? We're straight in. No warm up whatsoever. Give me and the listeners, mate, a little bit of an insight into who's Gary Hutt, what does he like to do, where have you been, what have you done?
I'm Gary Hutt. I've got 3 kids, a wife that I've been with for 10 years now. Second relationship. We live in Sheffield. We bounced around the country a lot. I'm actually quite proud at the moment that we've been settled for the longest period of time that we ever have done in our family life. My oldest daughter's lived in 5 different houses and been to 6 different schools, and she's only 9 years old. I had to think about that. But yeah, I started my journey at Sheffield Hallam University, going through the undergrad. Took as many opportunities as I could to understand coaching. We're both products of that program, and I think the great work that those guys do in terms of just sharing opportunities to coach is fantastic, and there's loads of people who have benefited from that. Went into football to start with, just because that was the opportunity that was there. Ended up working for Sheffield Hallam in that multi-sport kind of boiling pot of development. And everybody's got their own bias, haven't they? So you come down and you tell the story that of your journey, and your journey is always the one that you try and sell to everybody else. But having that multi-sport experience early on was massive in my career, like being able to have that challenge and context across loads of different sports opportunities, and really forced development. Personal reasons, I had to leave that role. Went and worked at Nuffield Health in the Midlands for a little while, then got fortunate and stumbled into the industry again in the university sector. Went on to lead the programme at Derby University in the Derbyshire Institute of Sport as an S&C lead. But that was a really interesting one, because like there's this straight line path that you picture yourself going along. At least I did when I first started, from like that intern to assistant coach to S&C coach full time, and then on to leading a program somewhere. But I kind of went along that path without really knowing what leading a program looked like or meant. And I remember there was a day when I was the job was great at Derby, but there was a day where I was hunting around for a printer to be able to print programs out in the gym, and realised that wasn't what I went to university, studied sports science, and put all the hours in coaching to try and spend my time doing. Yeah. So went self-employed for a while. Met a guy called Callum Henley who runs a gym called Forefront Performance in Long Eaton, and we teamed up on that General Pop gym. Whilst I was doing that, I ran an online business and worked with a range of different NGBs almost as a consultant, spinning lots of different plates. After about 2 years, I realised I wasn't too good at that. So ended up kind of with a failing business, working nights in an injection moulding factory to try and make money to survive with the family. Then spent a few months as a volleyball coach, because the volleyball was one of the major sports that I've worked in for a long time, and set up my business Volley Science around that, and that's still going now in the background. But yeah, got volleyball coaching, really enjoyed it, got some great experiences coaching in a different context and trying to apply my knowledge. And then fortune had it that a job in Sheffield came up for GB Boxing. Rachel, my wife, and I are both really comfortable in Sheffield, so we threw an application in, and I guess they didn't have many applicants, so I managed to get.
Love it, mate. I've heard that story a few times, from you, and like versions of it from people that Dave Hembrough, that type of thing, and I love hearing it, because exactly as you kind of said there, I think the way that we're always kind of taught in the industry, or at least it's sold to us, is that straight line career vision of, you're a junior, a senior intern, you go to get a grad role, assistant, and you just climb, and you just kind of demonstrated that it doesn't need to go like that. There's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be backward turns sometimes. So for me thinking through this, or thinking through your story, I would have been probably quite mortified and really kind of shell shook in a lot of different places. One of the ones that kind of jumps out to me there is the ink injection mold factory. Like, talk me through kind of your mindset in that moment. Then was this something where was you just like, well, I just got to get on with it? Was it a case of, just talk me through your mindset there?
So context, I guess. Working for myself, juggling and spinning a lot of different plates. I used to kind of try and fulfill contracts for NGBs across a range of different things, and got the online business, had the gym. Like, was juggling a lot of stuff and wasn't really generating the income I needed it to. So we got to a point where like we were really struggling financially, and really struggling financially. So that became the biggest driver that we needed to solve as a family. When we made that decision, it was easy. Like, walk to a job centre, go in, take whatever job they can give you straight away. So I went into the job centre that morning, was working a night that night, and got paid the end of the week. It's I think that if I looked at it through the lens of like having a giant ego, I could really mortified and struggle with the idea of the fact that I've not been able to execute on all of these things, and I've struggled with it, and my businesses aren't working the way that I need them to, and I'm just not doing the right thing. And yeah, you go through all of that and you kind of self-assess against it. And I don't believe, like, unless it's the last day of your life, like, you've got another opportunity to try again. And the Volley Science as a business is still rolling on 5 years down the line from when I was in that injection molding factory. When I was actually working there, it was class. Like, we live in an environment as S&C coaches where it's high pressure, go, 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 go all the time. And that job was not high pressure, no management about, because who wants to be there at night time if you've got any kind of ambition? Sat at a machine that I didn't have to do any thinking with, had little competitions against myself, but listened to 50, 60 books over the course of 8 months. Listened to loads of different podcasts from like Tim Ferriss right through to stuff from Alan Watts right through to Tony Robbins on finance, and really self-develop. Because who gets the opportunity to listen and learn for 40 hours a week if you're in a job? Like, and then be able to switch off completely and enjoy time with my family. Like, there were loads of positives to that kind of challenging and negative situation, and I just prefer to choose the positives to focus on rather than the negatives.
It's bang on, mate. I think it's, it is an inspiring way of like looking at it, and I think if more people kind of looked at their life in that lens, it'd be a lot easier to get through. And I think it sounds to me like it's super simple. What you've done there is, in your life, you've kind of looked at what your priorities are, and if I was going to ask you what your priorities are, Gary Hutt, you'd be like, well, dad, husband, like I'm a father, I'm a husband, and I'm probably an S&C coach, friend, whatever. But the most urgent thing was probably those top two there and then.
I think the interesting thing, mate, is that I think people get this muddled up and wrong all the time. Like, my wife and I, we speak about this quite often, but like, I really believe that if you've not got yourself in the right place, you can't be the right person for everybody else. So as a number one, you need to make sure that you as a person, you're happy with where you're at and you're fulfilled and you're achieving what you want to achieve. Then you bring that to your relationship. Like, if you can't bring the best to your relationship, then you're only underselling your partner. And then if you and your partner aren't bringing the best together, then how can you expect to set a good example for your kids and support them? And it's definitely a trickle-down approach. Now, there's an element of like selfishness in that, but everybody needs to be a little bit selfish. Like, I know that everybody's individual as well, and they take different viewpoints. Like, I love spending time with my kids, but I don't want to give them all of my time, because that won't be good for them. Like, it doesn't set a good example for them. And having commitments that they understand and I can talk to them about and really allow them to see, like, there's a really good talk. I can't remember what his name is, but it goes along the lines of like the dropout father that was a chef, but he's full of wisdom. I'll send you a link after, Jordan, if you can share this, because it's class. Yeah. But he talks about being an example of excellence, and he hoped we used to go out to work at 3 o'clock in the morning every day and hope that his kids would catch him in the act of excellence. And I really buy into that. Like, if you can give a good example to your kids of how to operate, that's better for me than me being selfish and trying to spend all my time with them. And yeah, I know that's perhaps controversial to the information that gets shared around a lot, because sometimes you can't say things like that widely. But I do think if you don't bring your best self to situations, then you're underselling every situation you're in.
think it's an interesting one, mate, and I think I'm not a parent yet, so I probably can't really comment on it from that perspective. I can just be, the son, and it's, you know what, I think it's caught me a little bit. I'm gonna have to go away and think about it before I can really even give you a good opinion on that. So you've stumped me, so it's good. But I suppose I'm most disappointed that the number one priority for you wasn't the printer at University of Derby, mate. Like that's got to be jumping up there soon again.
It could still be there going, mate. I don't know how effective I was at sorting that problem.
Yeah, you've got a printer behind you, mate. It's like a trophy for you. Never go anywhere without one now.
You know what? It's a bit of a secret one. This one, it's not linked into the real system that it should be. So don't tell anyone.
Contraband. Hi guys, I'm just going to take a brief break in today's podcast to talk to you about the Adapt online strength and conditioning coaching service. At Adapt, we put the athlete first and make sure that the whole program is set up around them, their goals, their sport, and their lifestyle to achieve the best possible performances. Our aim is to deliver an elite level coaching experience that typically isn't always commercially available if not part of a professional club or performance pathway system. We communicate with our athletes on a weekly and sometimes daily basis, making changes in technique and making alterations to the program based on how you're performing on any given day. We also bring in experts from psychologists, nutritionists and physiotherapists for online educational workshops to make sure we are giving you all the tools necessary to excel in your sport. So if you're looking to take your physicality to the next level and want to invest in yourself, head over to the website at adaptstrength.co.uk for more information, including some success stories of our current athletes, or drop me a message to set up a chat to discuss the options. Hope you're enjoying today's podcast, so let's get back to it. Sweet. I want to dig into the body science thing a little bit, mate. So obviously you're full-time with the IS. So how are you managing to support that, be a dad, a husband, all those things, be yourself, and kind of run that business alongside it? What is it? How does it work?
So the beauty of the role that I'm in, and I think every single S&C roles have challenges and they have opportunities. Like we all often find it really easy to look at the challenges in roles, but actually like there's a lot of opportunity around what we do as well. I look at you guys self-employed pushing PT. I picture that you're coaching a hell of a lot. You're having to spread hours all the time, but equally that gives you flexibility in your time to be able to pick and choose when that happens. Like not everybody wants to dedicate all that time to be able to do that, but the trade-off is to get the free time when you want it. You have to trade off some time when you don't. My role at the EIS, I've been very conscious from the start of trying to set it up in the way that functions well for the EIS, boxing, and my family and me. So with GB boxing, there's certain key commitments I need to be involved with. Obviously, the training sessions, they tend to happen in the mornings a lot. So I like to do early morning starts. I get to the EIS probably 6:30 every day, but then that gives me the license to finish my day early afternoon and get home and spend the afternoons with my kids and family. GB boxing is a great program because they know exactly what they want to achieve and how they go about achieving it over a long time. So there's not lots of pressure to be the face on the ground. Like as long as you're executing your role and you're having the right conversations at the right times and being influencing performance, then there isn't that pressure to be here all the time. And that's an ethos that's been handed down from the S&C coaches that are the legacy with that sport as well. And I think there's an element where it's easy to overlook that your behaviours drive expectations. So the way that you go in and act sets a standard for what's expected as you carry on going. So if you don't set the right behaviours and expectations in the start of a role, like everybody turns up and is really keen to have an impact. So you're there 100% of the time, 24/7, and then all of a sudden it's very difficult to step back and level back from that.
Yeah.
Whereas if you can be conscious over stepping into a role and understand this is what needs to function, this is how it needs to happen in the training space to get the outcomes we want. These are the behaviours that I'm going to put in place to justify and enforce that and make sure that I'm achieving 100% in the role that's expected. But then equally, I'm not going to overkill it and spend all my time doing it, and make it very, very obvious as to how you can operate and fulfill your role. I think that's a big learning I took from jumping around all of those different places. That sets the tone then for how you can control your own time, your own life, rather than being pulled into that situation where you're expected to be on the ground morning till night, 7 days a week, and that might not be something that's easily engineered from for everybody's situation. But I think if you go into it with the mindset of understanding where you're happy to compromise and what you're happy to deliver, then it gives you a fighting chance of being able to create the life and balance and all of that stuff that you want. Like, I think we've probably spoke before, Jordan, about like the idea of work-life balance. I don't really get, because like we're in sport, we get to work in people's hobby, like, and I mean, so I feel like I'm doing my hobby all the time, and I'm looking for work-life integration more than work-life balance, where we can get it all mixed up together. One of my favourite things in the whole week is having my wife come over and have dinner and lunch with me through work. I really, really value when the kids are off, my wife being able to pop over so we can go and have a play on the field that's just over there. In the middle of the day, I might have coaching after it, but being able to really bring them in and see an elite sport environment is something that I massively value.
I suppose that's you're just making every day a good day, basically. That just seems like that's what you're doing. You're just kind of injecting bits of things that you really love alongside the job, which you also love as well. And I was thinking about this literally yesterday as well, around like how long people spend at work, you know. So Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 or whatever, 40 hours a week. It's a long period of time. I think it works out as like 23 years of your life is spent at your workplace or something mad like that, taking out sleep. It's a long period of time, you know, and if it's not a place you want to be, then that can be quite a torturous place. And I know not everyone's in a situation necessarily where they get to choose enjoyment over money. And, you know, you kind of spoke through that and seeing the positives when you was at the factory, but it really kind of struck home with me that you need to make, I don't want to turn this into a motivational podcast, but you've got to make every moment count in that standpoint. You know, you've got to kind of try to engineer that ideal life. And you said it before, you know, of I think you said it this way, but basically starting with the end point in mind and then backtracking from there. And by the sounds of it, this isn't something that you've just done overnight. You haven't just started with this ideal setup.
No, I mean, you kind of stumble through and find your way, don't you? You end up in situations where you're not enjoying stuff, you're finding it difficult, you're giving more than you really feel comfortable. And quite often, like, I used to blame other people for that. And when I realised that that's not other people's responsibility, like, I manage my time and that lands on me. So I feel like that because I've created that situation because I want to do good, but by wanting to do good, I've perhaps stepped too far for what my values are and where I'm comfortable. So being able to pull it back or adjust or take that next opportunity to tweak and change is really important. Like, and I kind of, where I'm at now is thinking about, well, I like to think about what is the focus of our goal, what is the compass bearing that we want to follow, and then how do we absolutely nail that first step in that direction, and spend all my time obsessing over like that next step. And that's in programming, that's in life, that's in everything. Like, how can we absolutely squeeze everything we've got out of the next step? And like, as an example, it might be programming and periodization. Like, working in elite sport, you have this picture of like, everything must be weighed and measured in every single possible way. But actually, in reality, like, it's not. Like you're working in a dynamic, changing environment that's got loads of different moving parts, and each of those moving parts has an impact on how the training functions. So you might have a 6-month plan for an athlete, but after 2 weeks it's out the window because there's so many moving parts and changes in the system that you haven't been able to execute what you wanted to. So I like taking the approach in work and in life of, well, what is the key thing that's going to influence performance for this particular athlete? What are the things we need to do today or this week that make sure they take a step towards that in the best possible way? And then we'll have a look at it again at the end of the week, and what are we going to do next week to do exactly the same thing? Now, evaluating the context that's occurred and where it might go next. And I try and do that in life as well, really. So
in that decision making process, just going back to, I guess, the S&C side, was, you know, around the athlete and what's going to be the thing that nudges them towards a better performance. Who in your current setup, who's involved in that decision making? You know, is it a team wide thing? Is it just the athlete? Give some insight into that.
Yeah, it's funny again, mate. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to this, and I think there's again opportunity and compromise in all of it. Like GB Boxing is coach-led program, so the boxing coaches ultimately, alongside the athlete, make the decisions. I see my role as being able to fill a gap and understanding, to be able to give the coaches the information to make good decisions. And in that sense, it's always collaborative, but there has to be a final say. Now, individual athlete planning processes, there's 1,000,001 different ways that you can take it. So I've seen situations where you have a whole multidisciplinary team in the room with the athlete and you all talk about what's important and then the decisions are made. Or I've seen where everybody preps stuff up and like a single point of contact works with the athlete to try and develop a plan that's really important. I think the key thing is having a plan and then going after it with intent. So as much as I like to really value my skills as an S&C coach, and I can make physical change with all of these boxers, elite athletes, and it boils down to 3 things for me, like the consistency that they're training, the frequency of their training, and the intent they bring to that training. I would prioritize intent in training over the perfect scientific program, because I know that the adaptation is going to be based on the intensity and intent that they bring to whatever session it is, whether it's a strength session, whether it's a long, low, slow endurance session. If they're going at it with the right intent, they're going to get a lot more back than me getting the scientific elements of the program right, but not really getting them on board with it. And then it's my job to deal with that last little bit of getting the programming right, which really isn't like it should be. We should be able to do that without thinking too hard, as long as the end goal is clear.
Usually the program's a simple bit, you know, it's everything else that goes into it that is where the work is for the most part, getting you to that point of deciding what you need. Is this going to work? All that. Has that always been your philosophy? Or is that something that's kind of, is it circled back round? How have you got to that?
I think that it's probably the complete opposite of where I started out of university. Yeah, you know, we get 2 types of people in the industry, really, don't we? We get the coach and the scientist. Yeah. And even as an industry as a whole, it kind of swings and pendulums between the two. So 7 years ago, 10 years ago, there was a period where the EIS was really highly scientific and perhaps did deprioritize the coaching side. Maybe I'm a symptom of the fact that the EIS has swung towards more of the coaching side, bringing the science with it. I'm sure that 10 years before that, there was a focus towards the coaching side and engaging people. And I think as a coach, I try and balance myself across those 2 areas. Now, coming out of university, I was very much the scientist. Like, I wanted to understand what the perfect program was, like understand all the little blocks and like all the things that make up the human body, how they interact, how they work together, and how I can maximize the process of training. And I'm going through a phase now, perhaps, where I'm swung more towards the coaching end and trying to really understand how do I get this athlete on board with an understanding how this change impacts their performance in the ring or on the horse or in the squash court or wherever it might be, and make sure that they can squeeze everything out of each of the training sessions they do and everything out of the recovery between those sessions that they have. And so, yeah, I think without going too esoteric, like it's the same thing with politicians, isn't it? How can you have a politician that doesn't change their mind? Like, I think, how can you have a practitioner that doesn't look at what they've done and try and grow and change their mind?
Yeah. I get what, in terms of that then, so you kind of talked around being a better coach from like a communication, relationships. How do you go about that? How do you go about making that better? We've had a little chat around like Brett Bartholomew and some of the other guys that kind of put information out around language and relationships. How do you make that better? Is it just speak to people, reflect, or is there any kind of hard sources that you found for that?
Yeah, again, like being part of a network, like there's loads of great sources, and I think also like thinking outside of the box of S&C. Like I mentioned before, like one of the people that I listened to a lot while I was working in the injection molding factory was Alan Watts. Like he's a Eastern Western philosopher, like tries to mash up and understand life. Being able to take yourself out of the little bubble of sport and see where you sit is really important. I think it doesn't just impact on my approach and body language and engagement with a conversation, but it also impacts on like the way that I'm taking on board information from other people, or at least I try to be aware of it. I think there's a hard and fast rule that nobody ever gets everything right, and like you're only ever doing your best to try and support the people around you. Because if you can support the people around you to get the best out of themselves as well, then you're all going to progress. And then as part of the EIS network, we're really lucky that we get exposed sometimes to some really, really clever guys in particular areas around that. Like Adi Sharif with like communication, negotiation, conflict resolution, all of those things really good. I really like the Chris Voss book. That slips my mind again now, around negotiating skill. And he was an FBI negotiator. Now
it's not Split the Difference.
Split the Difference, that's the one. Really like that. Just full of practical tips on how you can consider approaching conversations, what might be important to be able to help and support and engage other people in getting the most out of their conversations as well. I mean, sitting back and trying to listen and be an active listener, you can play and self-reflect on that all the time. But then equally, I think like I've probably progressed with all of that, with working like having to try and be a father or a husband more than I have done in an S&C coach, as an S&C coach, because if you want to be really good at communicating and understanding yourself, you have like try having a conversation with a 3-year-old who doesn't want to leave a supermarket because they haven't got any chocolate. Like deal with that situation, and you don't have to be a parent to do that. Like everybody's got aunties, uncles, nephews, nieces. Give you time to be able to go and spend time with family and learn in those situations. So I think there's quite often this trying to be as efficient as you can to get to the end point. Like when I came out of uni, I wanted to get to that end point, that lead S&C coach role of whatever I thought it was. And I was trying to get there as efficiently as I possibly can. I want to be there in no time at all. And on that efficient journey, I didn't give myself enough space to be able to understand like and enjoy the steps on the way. Like I didn't get, and so I went rushing for that lead S&C coach role without understanding even what it was. And I think you see that quite a lot, don't you? Like it's across the industry as a whole. Like we're all competitive. We all want to push as far as we can, as efficiently as we can. And I guess as the beard says that I'm older than I am, but I guess as I've got a bit more experience, I've learned to take life a little bit slower and take the opportunity to kind of think outside of myself a little bit more.
It's interesting you say that around just going to that lead S&C role. That really was, you know, I guess around the Hallam circle at the time, that was like the holy grail, mate. It was, you know, it was Andrew Langford at the time. You know, when is Andrew Langford going to fuck off so we can have his job? That was what we wanted. We wanted the hierarchy to change places a little bit. And, you know, I think just reflecting on my career in that standpoint, I think I rushed to get to that lead, the same as you, rushed to get to that lead because I saw a little bit of a nicer salary, a little bit more control. But to be honest with you, I think reflecting on it, the thing that I didn't like about the role was that control element. You know, I had a shitload of control over stuff that I didn't want, and I had no control over the stuff that I really cared about, it was interesting. I think, kind of similar to what you said before around kind of throwing yourself really deeply into a job or a situation. And you didn't use these words, but kind of burning out, you know, in that sense of doing too much right away. I think it was kind of in reflection to your GB boxing role. And I did that. I did too much straight away, you know, and you can't really take a step back from that easily. And I think there's a few people in my network that have probably done something very similar actually as well.
I think if you talk to everybody in the whole network, everybody's done something of that similar nature. But then I also think that your lows set your highs and your highs set your lows. So if you don't have hard times, you don't know what good times feel like. And if you don't have the good times that you have, will always set what feels like a low time. And so I'm always very cautious of the phrase like burnout, because sometimes, or reflecting on me, that's perhaps just me expecting a lot of myself and finding it difficult to reach and achieve that. And what I've kind of tried to learn to do is identify, okay, sometimes there are stretch times, sometimes there are times where you have to push and be stretched and burned out and deal with it and get on with it and grow from it.
Adaptation.
Yeah, just like we expect our athletes to do. And then other times, like we've planted the seeds, let them grow and be able to reap the rewards for it and enjoy the good times. One of my favorite, I am 100% sure that I will have battered you with the lobster story before.
Yeah, I was literally just about to say the lobster story.
That's a real big one for me, like understanding that challenge isn't always bad. Challenge is the signal. Feeling uncomfortable can be the signal for growth as a practitioner and growth as a person, and that we shouldn't be spending our time always avoiding that burnout situation. Like, push yourself into that sometimes. It's good. Like, get on with it, grow. Don't try and sustain it for too long. But you've got to be able to go there sometimes, because everybody does. Like, nobody in any career path gets anywhere without working hard.
I suppose that's that point where you just said there, don't do it for too long. And that's probably the point, isn't it? I think through COVID, it's like, well, if we can get through COVID, it'll be fine afterwards. If we get through this pandemic, we'll be fine. And I think that's probably, you know, just in conversations with coaches that are either having a shit time at work or relationships, is when is that point? And it's for some of the guys that might be listening, we've both been involved in a similar thread with Rich Husseini. Am I saying his last name there? Right. Yeah. So some of the stuff that Rich is putting out is literally around this topic of burnout and practitioner well-being, kind of similar to Josh Fletcher's stuff as well. And I always enjoy kind of every once in a while, I'll just pop on Twitter and I'm hoping that you've said something, you know, because it usually pops up and I'm like, right, what's the conversation? Because I like it. Because one of the things about you, Gary, and we've said this before as well, is I don't think you're afraid to say things that isn't the norm. You know, not necessarily a contrarian by any means. You know, you're not going out to be like, nah, I think this, but I think you're not afraid to kind of push in those directions and say, well, actually, what about this? Yeah, I just find it interesting.
I really appreciate that, mate. I take that as a compliment because I think sometimes it's really easy to just go with the crowd. Josh, Rich, all of those guys on the socials are doing some fantastic work for the industry. Like, I absolutely love what they're doing. Shining a light and giving some hope to people who struggle. Like, how can you ever disagree with that as a philosophy? Like, trying to give people the skill set, and I'd throw Dan Howells into that mix as well. Like,
yeah.
How can you ever criticize people who are just going out to try and help others? Like, they're doing fantastic stuff. And practical, applicable stuff. And I think actually, like, sometimes it's really, really difficult on social media for everybody because, businesses have to stand out. Controversy makes things stand out. I can't remember whether it was even you that said this, Josh, Jordan, or whether it was someone else, but like, negativity picks up 10 times the amount of engagement and notice to positivity in social media. I can't remember who said that, but you can see it all over the place, though, can't you? Because that's what people engage with. They engage with the discussion or the polarized argument. And
it's the news, mate, isn't it? It's like, you click on the news, something bad's happened, there's been a massacre. It's never been, Gary had a great sandwich today, he's enjoying his life. It just doesn't happen. And that's kind of built into that's us as human beings, though. I think it's
So where I was going with that point was that sometimes it's really difficult to kind of get a true reflection of anything that's really going on in social media. And I don't think it's good for anybody to kind of just rely on social media. But equally, one of the things that I really value is being able to, like, nowadays in the modern day, like, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, when I was getting into the industry, I wouldn't be able to contact somebody at the top end of the industry particularly easily. Like, I don't know who was the S&C coach at GB Boxing at that point, but I wouldn't have been able to reach out to him as easily as I can now. And what we get in the modern day is not just that little social media link, but I super value having conversations with yourself online, or being able to get hold of Josh Fletcher and have a chat about stuff, or spend some time with Dan Howells because he's an incredibly intelligent guy, or chat with Rich Hussaini, who's absolutely passionate about supporting practitioners. And really grab 10 minutes of their time on an online chat just to talk things out, understand where everyone's going, and support, because, like, there needs to be more support in what goes on rather than challenge.
Yeah, I agree, mate. I think, I almost feel like social media does get a little bit of a bad rep nowadays, and I guess, what was the example the other day? Somebody said something around social media hygiene, of just cleaning it up. If there's people that you're scrolling and you think, I don't like them, they fuck me off, or whatever, just get rid of them. You don't necessarily need to see it. I think the great thing is that you can connect with almost anybody in the world, but that is probably also the negative as well. You don't need to like everybody. You don't need to be, everybody's best mate. You don't need to love everything. But it's one of them. I honestly haven't seen too much of the negative side of social media, actually. I get the odd bit of, not troll, but like overly criticism, more from people in the industry, actually, which is, it's interesting because I didn't think it'd be like that. But speaking to other people in S&C, and they're speaking through, how's Adapt going? How's the social media stuff? And, I say, it's great, this. You ever thought about it? And they'll be like, it just scares me. It's that imposter syndrome. And I definitely get that. But that's a you thing rather than a them thing, isn't it?
Yeah, what's the saying? Like, people reflect themselves on others. So often it's the exact same thing with that. If you've got worry, or you're kind of negative in your mind about stuff, then you're going to project out to other people, aren't you? And it's really natural to see that often. But equally, mate, like, it's social media is like perhaps its own ecosystem, and we've perhaps gone down a rabbit hole on that one. That's
yeah. I knew we would, mate. And I knew when I said I want to pick your brains on some stuff, I was like, we'll go everywhere but that place. So what I do want to kind of bring it back to then is this GB Boxing Land, this place that you've kind of ended up in then. So I know a little bit about GB Boxing. I did a weight placement a few years there, so I've got a little bit of an insight. And I guess maybe not historically, but they're a good program. You know, they have a lot of success, and they've had some great practitioners before you, and we'll probably have some great practitioners afterwards. How did you go about navigating trying to impact performance in a positive way initially, up until this point? Actually, like what's been your thought process there?
Yeah, so going back to the timeline, I guess I started GB Boxing on the 2nd of January 2019. I was really very fortunate to have Mark Campbell, who was the previous lead for GB Boxing, as my technical lead in the EIS. So he was in and around to be able to ask questions of, and he bent over backwards to try and support me integrating into the system over the first 6 months, because I think it's a really interesting shift going from employment a long time ago to self-employed for a little bit and then going back to employment. So it was absolutely massive having Mark on tap to be able to really help that transition. And the fundamental thing that I think I came into the role trying to make sure that I followed was that you need to understand the why of stuff before you change it. Now, even if it seems like the training practices are strange and unusual and not scientific and not the exact best practice you'd expect, you shouldn't ever change stuff if you're in a program that's functioning well without knowing what it's achieving. And an example of that was like some of the training sessions we used to do. I didn't see what the adaptation was. I didn't see what we were getting from that session. In my little world of like, okay, all of the conditioning work needs to get some kind of adaptation. Until I realised that some training sessions were a little bit light in my perception, because the guys are sparring in 2.5 hours, and really the sparring takes the priority as the physical stimulus and the technical, tactical and sports stimulus. So if we smash them with training, they're not going to be able to spar as effectively. And if they can't spar as effectively, they're not going to be that's going to be the thing that drives their boxing performance. So having clarity of the why of everything in the program then allowed me to understand why that's there, why it's functioning like that, before I then try and change it. Could easily have turned around, done a really hard session on that morning every week for the next few weeks, found out that it's impacting on the sparring. I'd been enemy number one of the coaches, enemy number one of the boxers, all because I've made a snap decision and not really understood the impact of that decision. So the first probably 6 months to a year of my role, I've changed very little. Particularly because it was well, at that point, it was a run into the Tokyo Olympics. So there wasn't a lot of time to really make changes, and any changes that you make are going to have an impact. So I took a very conservative approach of following what had already worked in the past, trusted that, had Mark on board to be able to engage with that, and learned about the program, learned why things are there, why things happen, and then be able to make decisions off the back of that. As it happened, COVID hit, and that extended our timeline up to the Olympics, and that also offered an opportunity to be novel, because what boxer in the future is ever going to have a 3 to 6 month period of time where they can't spar, or they can't do the boxing training that they want to do? It's not going to happen again unless there's another pandemic and the same thing happens again. So from a physical point of view, there's probably no legacy and no approach that you can really compare to, because every coach that have worked with boxing in the past has always had to work with boxers that spar. So although perhaps I took a patient approach to start with, there were also situations where the expectation was to be novel. The expectation was to think outside the box and be creative and have an impact. And I think it's really easy to rush and feel like you have to have an impact to justify what you're doing. I mean, I guess the taboo, the secret in a lot of S&C is that what's it take to make a great coach in S&C? Great athletes. If you've got a great athlete in front of you, you have to try hard not to help them. And we were really fortunate. We had like 6 Tokyo medalists, and I'd love to claim loads of responsibility for all of those medals. But really, if I was going to be really, really honest, I probably had a physical impact that impacted performance in a positive way, in a significantly positive way for one of those 6. The rest of them, I just didn't mess them up.
Yeah.
And they got what they deserve. Through the work that they've done historically and everything, and hopefully I didn't do things that were too far wrong, but I couldn't with good conscience turn around and say, yeah, they won that medal because of me.
Go
I
on.
was going to say, if that's your ambition as an S&C coach, you shouldn't be an S&C coach.
Well, it's very similar to what I was about to say. I think, and maybe I've been here before, probably, maybe you've been there before as well, of like wanting to feel important as an S&C coach, and it could have been so easy for you, particularly if you had more of an ego or hadn't had your previous years behind you, to go into this role and be like, right, it's Gary time. I'm going to put my stamp on it. I'm going to win the Olympics. And I guess, yeah, I don't really have a point to make on that, other than it could have been so easy for you to fuck up, in that standpoint. And I guess essentially, go on.
With that, I'm not saying I didn't fuck up, mate.
Yeah, true.
Up, and just chimes really strongly, because that going back to the linear progress to get to a lead coach, basically my driver for that was that I wanted control, because I wanted to be responsible for positive things that happened. But equally, there's never any one person that's responsible for progress other than the athlete themselves. And it probably took me 10 years to learn that.
Mate, it's so interesting. I wonder, do you think in 10 years time you're going to completely double back? Do you think you're going to end up back to this adaptation standpoint, or do you think this is you're this reflective coach that's not even passive? Because I wouldn't say it's passive. I think it's probably more, what's the word, direct. What's the word I'm thinking of? I'm butchering this.
I like to think of you like films, right? You like watching films.
Yeah, you
like Bruce Lee.
Yeah, I watch Bruce Lee.
So Enter the Dragon, when he talks about be water. Because water can flex, it can be hard, it can be changed to different shapes, it can do everything it needs to do. So just be water. That's the approach that I take at the moment. It might be passive, it might be direct, it might be any other thing that you can describe it as, but for whatever situation I'm in, I like to try and adapt to that situation. And it comes with it's a nice play on words, isn't it? Because I feel like adapt, strength and conditioning is something that takes a little bit of that. But I don't know where I'll be in 10 years. I might think Gary's an absolute dickhead. That old 10-year-old Gary, 10 years ago, Gary was a right prick. And I kind of think that a little bit about the 10-year ago Gary now. Yeah. But equally, I can see where he's trying to come from. Yeah. And I don't think that, I don't know. I think every situation is different. You change, you adapt. Sometimes you have to be a bit clearer and stronger. I have a knack of rambling on about stuff. So I think that's something that fits all right now, but in future it might be different.
Maybe. What I guess if you had to kind of this is kind of a red herring, just throwing it out there. If you had to kind of see where you're going to be in 5-10 years, and I know that's kind of an interview question, and I don't want it to be like that, but what do you think actually is coming up, about, the industry, or how predictable it can be in certain times? Like, where do you actually see yourself coming?
Again, like you say, it's a difficult question. There's a few key principles that I like to apply to this type of thing, and it's definitely not an interview answer, but hopefully there's some practical elements that I can pass on to others that are useful in their context. The first is, I don't really believe in our industry there's anything like security. So whether you're in a full-time paid employed role, whether you're self-employed and doing your own thing, I don't think there's ever security. If the funding dropped off for GB boxing right now, I'd be out of a job, and it wouldn't make any difference whether I've done a good job or not. It'll be, the funding's not there, so you're fucked. So I think that my way of handling that is understanding that you need an exit strategy for every role that you're in before you start. And that exit strategy might be, okay, I want to go and use this role to step onto something else, gain experience, become a better practitioner, and then move on. It might be, I understand what my monthly expenses are as a household. I've got 3 to 6 months of monthly expenses saved, so that if and when this job ends, I've got 3 to 6 months to work out a plan. And it could be anything in between those things. But I think that having an idea of an exit strategy is really, really important to give you that feeling of comfort and security. We've all talked to, everybody's talked in the industry, and what's Josh's phrase? Shit canned. Josh, people get shit canned all the time. That's because they do. That's because of the nature of the environment we're in, and the way that you can take control of that is understand what your exit strategy is. And with a small amount of financial knowledge, understanding exactly what it costs you per month to be able to live under a shelter, have food, have a little bit of leisure, and afford the things that allow you to tick on, like transport. If you understand that number, that gives you power to be able to make decisions financially in an appropriate way. I think it's a really funny one. I know I never used to know what that number was when I was an intern or somebody struggling on through loads of 0 hours contracts or really low pay. I used to worry about the pay all the time, but I never worry about my expenses. If you know your expenses, it gives you power to decision make and power to create safety. Now, that's a really, really practical thing that gets overlooked all the time. Just having 3 months of expenses in the bank gives you license to do, and some people call it fuck off money. So let's say you've got 3 months of expenses, so you can survive and find a new job for 3 months. It gives you the license to tell the people who give you a job to fuck off if you want to. Whereas if you've got no expenses and you're living hand to mouth all the time, then it's very difficult. And I've been in all of those situations, and I definitely prefer the one where you've got some fuck off money to be able to exit if you want to.
Mate, I love it. And I think it's kind of where I want to finish today's podcast. I think that's a really positive end to it, and sharing a little bit of a story of when I was a little bit of a student, more of a student, I guess. I was on a night out with a guy who you'll know, Mike Moore, big guy with a beard. He works at Sheffield Steelers now. Best mates, he's one of my best friends, and we lived together for a while. And we were on a night out. I must have been so pissed. I must have just been past the point of me being a good person to be around. And he gave me some fuck off money, and he literally gave me a £5 note, put it in my shirt pocket, and went, "Webb, fuck off." And I did. I went about my business, and woke up in the morning. He came back into my room and took that fuck off money back out of my shit, and that was it. So yeah, fuck off money. I think that's a really good point to finish on. I think, mate, we probably need to get a part 2 in us as well. I think I'd love to get a part 2 podcast where we go through some of the nitty gritty of GB boxing and performance, and breaking down performance from that standpoint. but I didn't want to leave it. I was happy with where we were going there.
That's cool, mate. I'm always happy for a chat. And equally, put it out to the listeners. Like, if they've got particular questions, if they want to know some specifics around what goes on in my role day to day, or they want to grill me a little bit more on with some Q&A, like, by all means, I'm happy to follow up with however you want to go. Always happy to ramble on shit, and I'll try and be more structured in future.
No, that's good, mate. I loved it. What I'll do after this, Gary, is I'll put all your information in the show notes below, so your Twitter, Instagram, and all that stuff. And I'll also put those videos that you're going to send over that you mentioned. But yeah, I just wanted to thank you for your time, mate. It's been awesome. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me on, Josh. It's been great, mate. Keep calling you Josh. Right.
Josh, Joe, and Jordan.
Thank you, Jordan. I appreciate it
mate.
a lot.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Adapt Performance podcast. Let me know what you thought about the episode by leaving a review or sending me a direct message. I'm all for receiving the honest feedback to make sure the episodes grow and get better and better. Like, share, subscribing and following all goes a long way to making sure the podcast reaches the right people. Thanks a lot. Catch you next time.